Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Bear Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the suffering servant passage in the book of Isaiah. We're in chapter 46, and this begins a long section in which God speaks directly to Babylon, judging Babylon for her sins and promising the return and the restoration of the children of Israel to Judah, to rebuild Jerusalem, and to prepare for the coming of the Messiah, which really is the topic of this section. This is like the book of Habakkuk, only really this section is a bit longer than the book of Habakkuk. The book of Habakkuk, of course, written during the same time this was being written, during the days of Hezekiah, contemporary with this book, in which Hezekiah complains about, um, or excuse me, Habakkuk complains about the sins of the Israelites, of the Jews. God, and how long will you put up with this? God said, I'm sending Babylon. And he says, how can you do that? They're worse than we are. And God says, I'm going to punish them too. And then and then, as he says in Isaiah, I'm going to bring you all home. That part of the vision was not given to Habakkuk, but it is here. And so those points are all being made here. And let's remember that Isaiah, I said Habakkuk was roughly contemporary. Habakkuk with Isaiah. Habakkuk is a little later than Isaiah is. Habakkuk more the time of Josiah, and Isaiah in the court of Hezekiah, which is an important point because Isaiah is writing these things when times are good. Not that there isn't a threat from the Assyrians to the north, an existential threat, but they have a good king and they are observing the law more carefully than at any other time in their history, even during the days of David, which Kings and Chronicles makes clear. And yet, after Hezekiah dies, Manasseh reigns, and then his son Ammon. They're both bad kings. Between the two of them, nearly 60 years of just the worst decadence, idolatry, and insult to God. And so he's telling them ahead of time what's going to happen, and he's already talked about their sins and the necessity of Babylonian captivity. But in these next two chapters, he's going to talk directly to Babylon, saying, you're not all that. This is me working in history, and don't you forget it. So let's begin with chapter 46. We're going to look at verses 1 through 4. Bel has bowed down, Nebo stoops over. Their images are consigned to the beasts and the cattle. The things that you carry are burdensome, a load for the weary beast. They stooped over and have bowed down together. They could not rescue the burden, but they themselves have gone into captivity. Listen to me, O house of Jacob, and all the remnant of the house of Israel, you who have been born by me from birth and have been carried from the womb, even to your old age, I shall be the same. Even to your graying years, I shall carry you. I have done it, and I shall carry you. I shall bear you, and I shall deliver you. This is just a wonderful little package of truth where God speaks first to Babylon, the conqueror, and then to his own conquered people. Um, and he mentions Bel, which is the Babylonian, the Akkadian version of Baal, which means Lord, and Lord stands in for Marduk. That's what they would call Marduk, their great god, the great god who defeated Tiamat, the serpent of chaos, the dragon of chaos in their religion, and his son, and number two, who is a god of wisdom and a god of protection, is Nebo. And so he's speaking directly to Marduk and Nebo and saying, your images are consigned to the beasts and the cattle. It reminds me of that Shelley poem Ozymandias, about this traveler, stumbling upon the ruins of a once mighty and imposing statue, and the inscription that's just, a piece of broken stone now says, "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my work, ye mighty, and despair." That's what God is saying. Exactly what God is saying to the great buildings and the great images of the Babylonian Empire. You're just going to be in a pasture field, and you yourselves are going to be called upon to be beasts of burden, but you won't be able to carry anything. Your own people are going to be carried into captivity because you're powerless. But then he says to his own people, house of Jacob, "You were mine from birth." He's already said this in in chapter 43, just a few chapters back. I formed you, I named you, I paid for you, and you're mine. And I'm going to bring you home. And he says the same thing here. And he says, I'm going to be carrying you. I've carried you from cradle to the grave, from before the cradle, from your womb. I've been carrying you from, and I will continue to carry you and deliver you. And so the images of God, carrying a child, carrying his children and carrying them home, which is an image that he returns to over and over again throughout this section. It is one of the tropes woven together with some others, one we'll see next time, that kind of create the woof and the warp of this piece of cloth that is the suffering servant section, chapter 40 through the first verses of chapter 56. Okay, we're going to look at God repeating a second trope that it weaves together this section next time, verses 5 through 7. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.